I first met today's speaker, Chip Mahan, in 2008 at his small office off Shipyard Boulevard near Henry's. Chip and two of his business partners, Lee Williams and David Luck, talked about how they were creating a bank without branches to only serve veterinarians around the country. They told me they were using Google Maps to help convince the FDIC that they could evaluate each opportunity without having a presence in each community. Chip's dog ran around the office during pretty much the entire meeting. Fast forward to today, and Chip and his team have done everything they said and much more. Last year, Live Oak Bank went public and is now worth $500 million. Live Oak spun off its technology unit into a separate company called Encino, which is likely our region's fastest growing technology company. It raised $29 million last year from venture capital investors. Combined, the two companies have more than 500 employees. Live Oak has built a modern corporate campus near Independence Boulevard. And by the way, that campus includes a dog kennel, so now all the employees' dogs can come to work too. But beyond the obvious things, it's important to note that Live Oak Bank has been a model corporate citizen. They seem to support and be involved in every nonprofit and good cause in town. Whenever Live Oak commits to something, it's not merely paying lip service or writing a check. Chip and his team get personally involved in numerous efforts in our community. We're honored to have Chip with us here today to talk about his background, the Live Oak Bank and Encino stories, as well as talk some about the future he sees for our business community. He will be interviewed today by Vicki Janowski, the editor of the Business Journal. If you have a question during the discussion today, please text it in to the number that's on this little slips of paper on your table. That number is 910-264-8955. Make sure you include your name and table number in those texts, and we'll get a microphone to as many people as possible so you can ask your question directly to Chip. Chip likes to say that Live Oak is in the American dream business. We're going to start off today with a video that shows how Live Oak helped one of its customers achieve his dream.
I grew up on a small farm, and I would go in the summer and work and help them and be around it and everything, and I always loved it. And I always wanted something like that of my own, and just finally got the right opportunity. It's the same story at every bank, you know, they anywhere from $250,000 to $350,000 down. And I said, you know, there's just no way we can do that. We was looking on the internet and found Live Oak Bank. They had real flexible financing, real down-to-earth people. First guy I spoke to was Mr. Randy. I kind of told him what I had, you know, what I was looking to do, what I was wanting to buy, how, you know, kind of what I was looking for. He told me, he said, I think we might can work with that. They gave me an application, we filled it out. I was at work the day I found out that the loan had been approved. I was so excited, you know, because this is something that I've been wanting for over 10 years. And just seeing the progression of it along the way, see the dirt work start, seeing the chicken houses come up, and each little step of it, you know, it was very rewarding knowing that we worked so hard, but our work was paying off. It was very humbling to know that Live Oak Bank would put enough trust in us to go with us and help us throughout the process of building the farm and getting everything ready. The ability to start my own business, it has been definitely a life changer for me. I'm going to be able to be at home and spend time with my family. Also be able to provide a good living and a good future for my kids. One day, whenever I decide to retire, I'll hand this over to them and this will be theirs. Any veterans that are looking to get into farming, if you have a love for outdoors and farming, definitely call Live Oak Bank and see what they can do for you.
The type of client that Live Oak Bank has built its model around, correct? It's the customer that doesn't necessarily live in Wilmington, even though Live Oak is based in Wilmington, even though Live Oak is currently the only public company here in Wilmington. But its customers are really around the country. And I know when I was asking earlier, did Matt represent one of your customers from a farming vertical? Because the bank is very specific about the types of industries it's lending to. Chip said, no, he's from the chicken vertical. But that is the model you guys have created and that you're building your company around. And in just a relatively short time, Live Oak Bank has made a splash, not just here, but on the national banking scene. It's the second largest SBA lender in terms of dollars, behind only Wells Fargo nationwide. But this is not the first time that Chip has started a bank and sought to be a disruptor in the industry. He was in the 70s is when he started his banking career, but soon after, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, became chairman and CEO in the 80s of Citizens Union National Bank and Trust in his home state of Kentucky, gathered a group of investors together and sold that to Bank One, became head of Cardinal Bank Shares, and then by a route that we definitely want to talk about, became the person who founded the world's first internet bank. This was in the mid-90s, and as Jonathan was pointing out, it's hard to picture this as ubiquitous as our smartphones are, but an idea perhaps ahead of its time. But at the same time, spun out a profitable banking technology company called S1 Corp. That at its peak had a market capitalization of $7.8 billion. So a non-traditional bank spinning out a banking technology seems like a model that you've kind of worked on throughout your career. So that's something we're going to talk about a little bit today, and also what you see the future of Live Oak and Encino from this point on forward. Let's go back a little bit to back in the beginning in the 70s when you were a young man, started your career, and coming out of college and went to go work for Wachovia in Winston-Salem. Now, talk a little bit about how you, as a young man of that part, went from a fairly stable banking job, probably bright future and years ahead of yourselves, to say, I'm going to strike out on my own and start over and essentially pull investments together to the point where you even had to mortgage your own house to pull the entire investment amount and convince your wife to do that.
Right. So in this political season, I'm going to answer the question in just a minute, but I got an announcement to make, right? So I and 375 Live Oakers have the best job in the world. So Matt Anglin, that guy you just saw, I called Matt this morning. I said, hey, Matt, I'm going to show you in front of 500 people today. And I just want to know how it's going, partner. And he said, Mr. Chip, he said, you won't believe it. This is the greatest thing in the world. So Matt built 660 by 60 feet chicken houses. He grows in 42 days a 10-pound chicken for Sanderson Farms, 23,000 chickens per house. When he graduated high school, he went to work offshore. His farms are about 10 miles outside of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, just north of Mobile. He worked 8 years on the rigs, decided to serve his country. When he was serving his country, he lost his wife, divorced, came back, remarried, could not find a job, went to paramedic school, 2 full-time paramedic jobs, right? So this guy's working 18 hours a day, making $40,000 a year. Hey, Matt, how's it going this year, really? What do you think you'll do? He'll make $100,000 this year. And you know what he's excited about this afternoon? Going to his son's baseball game. So we have the best job on the planet, leveraging a government-guaranteed program to help folks like Matt and in other industries. So back to Mrs. Mahan, right? So that lady right over there, real quick, born in Lexington, Kentucky, moved to Buffalo, New York. My father was killed in a plane crash when I was 11 years old. Moved to Frankfort, Kentucky to live with our grandparents. The first Sunday we were in town, I met Peggy, that lady right over there, and told her that I was going to marry her when we were 14. Did so at 22, and that was 42 years ago. And yes, to answer your question. Maybe more than that.
Uh-oh.
And to answer your question, yeah, we made a decision that you're either an employee or you're an owner, right? So I did walk in one day and say, we are going to attempt a hostile takeover of the bank in our hometown. And I left Wachovia Bank after 10 years, and through a friend, we raised a $50 million line of credit because the board of directors was trading the stock of this community bank at 25 cents on the dollar, 25% of book value. And I felt like that we could buy the stock for 3 times that amount and still basically make a wonderful trade. And I rented an office space with 1 lamp. This was in 1982, right? So this is a long time ago. And didn't have a shareholder list. Went door to door, offering people 3 times what they thought their stock was worth. Got exactly no shares. Crawled on my belly to go back to my boss to get my job back. And then we went on to do Citizens Union and all those other things that you talked about.
So you jumped in the deep end on that one.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you're married to somebody like that that says wherever you hang your hat is home. You can do anything.
And then let's talk about another time you jumped in, Security First Network Bank. Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, so we had a banking company in Kentucky. The idea was to buy pig path banks in the middle of nowhere Appalachia that had a lot of deposits, no loans. And then we started banks in the thriving metropolis of Lexington and Lowell. So make loans in the city, deposits in the country. And Peggy's younger sister married a really smart guy who had a security software firm in Atlanta. And we were drinking wine at dinner one night, and he said, this was in 1992 or 93. A lot of the CloudWise folks probably weren't even born then, but he said, man, this internet's gonna be a big friggin' deal, right? So, okay, what's the internet? So he explained to me what it was, and I said, well, why don't we put a bank on the internet? And we could offer CDs or money market accounts. And he said, no, you're stupid. He said, what we really need to do is we need to put Quicken on the web, to which I had to ask, what is Quicken, right? So, you're shipping disk and all that stuff. My CFO would have jumped out of the window at the time to get all the data that was tied to that disk, right? So that's what we attempted to do. And we were aware that Wells Fargo was thinking about the same thing. And we beat them to market in October of '94. Security First Network Bank was the first bank on the internet to do transactions, show a copy of a check. Because fundamentally, all you're trying to do is show a person what their balances are on the bank's books, right? That's really what we wanted to do. And then march across the enterprise after that.
Do you think it was an idea ahead of its time? Were people not ready for internet banking?
Yes, I mean, arrows in the back, right? So I remember sitting on stage with my brother-in-law, with Bill Gates, and obviously Mr. Gates was the featured keynote speaker, and we came up afterwards. And he had not actually embraced the internet at that time. And this was 93 or 94, and we basically said, by golly, you're gonna have, to your point, a wicked fast pipe. We said, in 1998, you're gonna have a wicked fast pipe, and you can do any financial services on the planet. We didn't know about, your phone or the iPad and stuff like that at that time. But yeah, so we were like 20 years too early.
But now, at the same time, as we were saying earlier, it did have a spin-off technology company, somewhat similar to...
We did, and that was the same thing that we did. Pierre Naudet, my partner, who is the chief executive officer in Encino. So it's hard to get the valuations right. You got people that are interested in owning a bank stock that don't fully understand the software business. So recurring revenue, the software business is worth many more times a bank trading at some multiple of tangible book value.
So what did those experiences bring to you then when you were here in Wilmington, and Live Oak Bank started in 2008, launched?
Yes.
What lessons were you taking from those previous endeavors to when you created this?
Well, I'd say don't make the same mistake twice. And, and fundamentally it gets back to the business model, which I hope you'll let me show you here in just a minute. But at Live Oak, we knew that if we could get the federal banking regulators to approve the model that I'm going to show you, right, that we had something special. And we all talk about the three-legged stool of business, right? So you have your folks, you have your customers, and you have your shareholders. And people say, well, do that all equally, right? Most of them don't really mean it. They focus more on the shareholder. And we said, look, let's not be greedy this time. let's do everything that we can possibly do for our folks. So most bankers would say, you know, how in the world can you do that? How can you do a 6% 401k match? How can you pay 100% of everybody's health care? And in the early days, we think fitness is important. So we paid for everybody to go to a personal trainer. So if you're making $50,000 a year and a personal trainer charges $60 a session, $180 after tax a week's a lot of money. But that's not the object of the exercise. The object of the exercise is to look everybody square in the eye and say, you are important to me, and mean it. Because what happens then is if you hire like-minded folks that become part of the team, they never want to let a teammate down. And that's really what we fundamentally created here. And then you say, we've got a restaurant, we got 3 airplanes, how can you do that? Well, you know, we're growing 30% year over year and trying to create something, you know, that's a little bit different.
So when you say create something a little bit different, when you guys are starting in the beginning with a blank slate and deciding what you wanted Live Oak Bank to be, you're working on your charter, what made you conceptualize this model or go after SBA-backed loans? Basically, how did Live Oak come to be what it
Right.
is?
Can you pop up that one slide, Rob? Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the banking business in 2 ways, right? And then we'll talk a little bit about the software business. So the community banking business, right? And it happened here in Wilmington. Port City Capital Bank, I think was the name. So you grab a bunch of investors and you say, I'm going to raise capital from the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, right? And we're going to start a bank, and we're going to hire really great folks, steal them from B of A or Wells or whatever, and we're going to outservice all the big guys, right? And then we're going to raise money at book value, and then we're going to grow, and we're going to raise a little bit more money, and then we'll sell out down the road, right? So here are the facts. B of A, Wells, Citibank, US Bank, and the Chase Manhattan Bank owned 38.5% of the deposits of the banking business in the United States. You add the next 10 banks, and you're at 53%. And I have wonderful friends at the SunTrust Company, and I know some of those folks are here, and Bill Rogers and Mark Chancellor, a great friend of mine, but we're going to talk about that a little bit. So it's a tough business. The banking business is a very, very difficult business. So the regulators during the Great Recession and Dodd-Frank doubled the amount of capital that we have to have. So let me see if I got this right. I'm going to have $1 worth of capital and $10 worth of loans. So I get to buy into a blind pool of credit risk. And in an interest rate environment like we have. So the facts are, I went back and looked it up a couple of days ago. So SunTrust, one of the most respected institutions in the United States of America, did $8.5 billion in revenues in 2011 and did $8.1 billion in revenues last year. When the regulators are all over you and you're running a declining revenue business, it is just tough. So we said, is there a better way? Is there a way to leverage a government guaranteed program and think about it entirely differently? So, and it doesn't make any difference whether it's Park Sterling Bank and my dear friend David Parker I'm looking at right now, or BB&T or any of the, they're in footprint and they have branches, and there are 94,520 branches in this country, right? They have tellers and customer service reps, and they grab a deposit, then they make a loan, they make a spread. And that's usually about 85% of the revenues of a bank. And we said, what if we did this? What if we didn't care about the footprint? What if we looked at all 50 states, and then we looked at a government guaranteed program called the Small Business Administration that's been around since 1953, where the United States government guarantees 75% of every loan. And that's a pro rata guarantee. So if the loan goes bad and you lose 50 cents on the dollar, the government loses 50% of the 75%, and we lose 50% of the 25%. But more importantly, what if we looked at those industries that the SBA allows you to lend to, and there are 1,100 of them? And don't be silly. Pick the ones where people pay you back, right? So let's get the data from the agency. So veterinarians and dentists and independent pharmacists and the 13 that we're in, we say, well, let's go after them. But first, let's figure out the credit box. What is the best way to figure out a credit box? So let's go find somebody that's operated these businesses. So Don Jackson is an investor in our bank and a board member. Don Jackson is the former chief executive officer of Pilgrim's Pride. Pilgrim's Pride produces 35% of the poultry business in the United States. Don knows something about the chicken business. So go tell the credit guy what a good chicken loan is, right? So, and there's another slide. Jerry Pullins is the former CEO of Service Corp International, the largest consolidator of funeral homes in the world. So Jerry knows something about the funeral business. So go direct the credit guys on the credit box. So that's fundamentally what we do. We fan out in all 50 states, and we say, let's figure out channel partnerships and all that, and just attack that industry. As opposed to, sorry to, on the SunTrust folks again, I can't imagine a more difficult job than being the chief credit officer of a really large bank. Think of the thousands of different industries that they got to know a lot about, all right? So real quickly, back to that other slide. I'm just going to do this real quick. And for you in the back, you got no shot. I looked at this yesterday back there. Just maybe you can hear me. So our average loan is $1 million, right? $750 is guaranteed by the United States government. So we're a paper factory. All those people in that fancy building that Rob talked about are in a paper factory. We sell a $750 in a very active secondary market, and we make $75,000, roughly. The government requires that we service that loan, so we make a 1% fee on that. So that leaves us with $250. Not really, because our average debt service coverage ratio is very high, really good borrowers, right? Other banks and credit unions buy our unguaranteed paper. When we sell $150,000 of the unguaranteed paper, we make another $1,500. So that leaves us with exposure to that veterinarian or dentist or independent pharmacist of just $100,000, right? But if you're doing the math and you say, well, you made 75 on the first trade, in 12 months you gained a servicing fee of $7,500 to service the government guaranteed loan, and you made $1,500 selling the unguaranteed paper, and you charge the borrower 2 over prime or $5,250, it looks like to me you got back $89,000 and you only have $100,000 worth of exposure. And I know I thoroughly confused you, but that's fundamentally what we do, right? And then if you just bounce down, just keep going, I'll power through this real quick. Yeah. So when that is in place, what can happen, right? So we've been in the vet space the longest. So last year we sold $150 million worth of loans to veterinarians for about $12 million. But we service a veterinarian portfolio of about $700 million. So that's the $6 million that you see there. And we have some unguaranteed vet paper on the books. So that's another $6 million. So that's about $25 million worth of revenue in 1 year, right? So then you ask me the question, well, how many folks? What's your overhead? 17 folks and $3 million. Highly profitable business, right? So if you could just go one more and I'll try to hush and take more questions. So here's the problem with all that, right? If you're in 3 time zones and 50 states, and your goal in business is to treat every customer like they're the only customer in the bank, and your secondary goal is to never touch data twice, how are you going to do that, right? When you have a lending officer in Marin County, California, you've got an underwriter in Denver, you got loan administration officers in Wilmington, and closers in Wilmington, and servicers in Wilmington. And so I'm so glad, Pierre, that Neil Underwood is not here today. So, and I just, please, we got to have a vow here that we can't tell Neil that I'm saying this, right? So in the software business, I think Pierre will agree with me. They're what we call 20Xers, right? So think of Vicki and I. You hand Vicki a Rubik's Cube, and she does it in a nanosecond. I couldn't do it in a lifetime, right? Those are the 20Xers. On top of the 20Xers, there are people that understand where the puck's going, right? So kind of think jobs, right? That phone, it's perfect, it works, it's simple, right? So when I challenged Neil with the problem, he's one of those guys to do all this stuff internally for us, which became Encino. So I'll pause there. I know that you want to ask a lot more questions.
Let me ask you one more question about the Live Oak model,
Yeah.
but then we're going to turn it over to the audience. So remember, if you have questions for Chip, to text them in to the number that's on your table, and we'll get those out to you as many as we can. So with Live Oak, and you referenced this a little bit earlier, I mean, you guys were one of the last ones to get in under before the regulations from
Right.
FDIC really clamped down, and one of the few new banks that have even been chartered since that time, since '08. So what, now if those regulations were relaxed and more start entering the space, or even if the existing lenders start going after the same kind of niche as well, these SBA backed loans, do you feel like you guys will have stronger competition? Will you start losing your competitive advantage?
Well, a couple of things. You referred to the kind of last end. We were the last community bank approved by the FDIC, us and a bank in Asheville. There has been one bank approved since 2008 to today, and it was an Amish bank in eastern Pennsylvania called Bird in the Hand Bank. The regulators typically would approve 200 to 300 community banks a year, which I think is great for America. I don't think that's going to come back, unfortunately. Relative to competition, you know, to me, it gets back to culture and those things that we talked about earlier. Pierre has sold Encino software to 110 banks, including some very large banks, and has just been discovered by the largest systems integrating firms on the planet. So to me, you know, there's 6,600 banks in this country. You know, the water's warm. Use our software and we'll compete. Good luck.
Okay, let's take it to the audience and see what questions you have to ask.
So again, if you have questions, text them in. It's 910-264-8955. There's slips of paper on your sheet. Just make sure you put your name and table number. We've gotten a couple questions about Wilmington and what are the, basically it summarizes to what are the advantages and disadvantages of operating Live Oak and Encino out of Wilmington.
You know, that's a really good question. Pierre and Neil and I get asked that all the time. But to me, it's like, Pierre is sitting over there. So may I have the drum roll, please? The software company has to be located in the Silicon Valley. Well, I know one thing that's going on in the Silicon Valley, right here, right now, every minute of every day. All those young folks that work for all those companies in Silicon Valley are looking at their LinkedIn account to see if they can go across the street where the options vest on the way to lunch so they can do another gig, right? They have a very short-term mentality. I think, Pierre and I think the exact opposite. We think if we can get you to Wilmington and all those other things, the building, the gym, the restaurant that subsidized $700,000, 3 airplanes, and, you know, you got the wonderful downtown and you got the beach and, you know, maybe you got a club or two. Why would you leave? You know, I look our young folks in the eye every day. Our options vest not on the way to lunch. Our options vest 10% each of the first 5 years and 25% in year 6 and 25% in year 7. I firmly believe this is first pitch, second pitch, first inning for both companies. Pierre's just being discovered. Let me see if I got this right. If I'm a director at Live Oak Bank, you're in 13 industries, Mahan, and they allow you to lend to 1,100, and you got this wonderful software platform. Could you not become the eclectic home for other specialty finance companies outside the SBA? Let's get going. So I think we can challenge all of our people here in Wilmington.
Next question.
Question table 66, Jenna. We'll get to you a mic.
This is the hazards of a sellout crowd.
I think you kind of just touched on this, but just curious what kind of the long-term vision is, 5-year goal, 10-year goal, 20-year goal for Live Oak Bank here and globally.
So can you repeat that?
Jenna was asking, what do you see down the road for Live Oak, 5-year, 10-year goals that you have, both here locally or even globally? Do you guys plan to stay here in Wilmington?
Yeah, my gracious sakes alive. Yeah, oh Lord, yeah. I mean, you know, I think it's limitless. I mean, I think that the big banks have challenges, right? It's like working for the government. I think there is a potential huge brain drain, right? So if we can continue to attract and retain talent, I see no reason that this couldn't be, you know, many, many times the size it is today. And I feel the same way about Pierre's company.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but your campus over in Midtown that you guys have built your first 2 buildings on, there's space out there for room to continue to add on to that, correct?
The McCrae family has just been wonderful to us. We bought 10 acres from them, and we have an option to buy another 25 acres. And we did a bunch of math on that. And we think that we can put 3,600 people on that campus. And you all can help me after this meeting to talk Pierre into moving over there with us. I'm still working on him every day.
Okay, let's grab one more question.
The question from Jonathan. Jonathan Weiss.
Thank you. Yes. So what criteria do you use to decide which industries to lend to?
What industries, how do you guys decide which industries to lend to? How are you picking these verticals that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so we're data hounds. The SBA now has, for the past 5 years, a lot of good data on people that pay you back. So a good example would be veterinarians were at the top of the list. And then I looked at the data 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, and chickens overtook the vets. So stay with me on this, right? So this is an SBA loan. The cumulative loss of $2 billion worth of chicken loans by all banks in the United States on chicken loans for 13 years was 109 basis points, so 1.09%. So you divide that by 13, it's, you know, under 1/10 of 1% a year. So we looked into that, and this relates to the video, right? And we said, what's going on there? Well, one bank in El Dorado, Arkansas, made half the chicken loans. So I called a headhunter and said, I want to talk to the El Dorado State Bank's chicken man. And he called back and he said, Billy won't talk to you. I said, well, let me talk to the number 2 chicken man in Fayetteville, Arkansas. That was Randy Ratliff, who was in that film, and he wouldn't talk to me. Jody Murphy in Gainesville, Georgia, was the number 3 chicken man, and he wouldn't talk to me. And then this is kind of a sad story. Then 3 years ago, in November of 13, Billy Mack Stewart called me back. He said, Chip, I got cancer, and the bank's not treating me well. I said, I'll be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I flew down, met with Billy Mack, and on Christmas Eve of 2013, we did a lift out, and we hired the top 5 chicken guys from this bank. So they all kind of shuffled into our offices, and I said, so, all right, boys, we're in business together now. How much in loans are you going to do this year? Well, maybe we do $30 million worth. Last year, they did 400, right? So the answer to your question, we follow the data, and then sometimes it's a kind of a gut feel. I did a little thing on Fox Business News 5 years ago, and sitting in, you know, it's a 2-minute kind of friggin' thing. And then the guy sitting next to me said, I went to your website and you're missing the boat. You ought to lend money to investment advisors. No bank will lend money to investment advisors. No loan to value what? There's no collateral. But there's a lot of recurring revenue, right? So now this year we'll do $200 million worth of loans to investment advisors nationally. So that was more art than science, or more science. So
how many niche industries then are you guys targeting now?
We're in 13.
13.
Renewable energy is our newest. Government contracting is also in the last 90 days. We have one of our most talented people who is responsible for that. And she has SEAL Team 6 assigned to her, so our best and brightest young folks help her find the next and the next and the next.
So last year, Live Oak Bank, Bankshares, parent company, decided to go public, have an IPO. And this came about a year after you guys had gone down that path some way, but reversed and ended up not doing it. So what was different this time last year? What made you guys want to become a public company?
Well, so the facts were, we've got a Ferrari here, right? And you got to decide whether you want to continue to grow. In the banking business, even though we're laying off a lot of our papers, I tried to explain, we want to continue to grow. So we filed to take the company public, and we anticipated a price of 15 times forward earnings, and Wilmington Asset Management, who's the largest investor in bank stocks in the world, and the guy that runs that section of the business is a dear friend of ours, basically hit the bid. He said, I'll buy 25% of the company today at that price. We said, great, we'll delay it. And then we needed more money this year, so that's why we took it public this year.
And then with Encino, which again is a spinoff company, separate entity now, so that is a private company.
It is a private company.
You often say, and I'm going to butcher your catchphrase here, but that you're a tech company that happens to have a bank, not a banking company with a technology company on the side. What role do you see Encino growing into in the future?
Pierre's situation is limitless. So fundamentally, what we all believe, Pierre's team and my team believe, it's back to the internet banking 101 thing, right? So they're going to be huge winners and losers out there in the banking business. So we attempt to begin the day a customer comes to our website to develop a fully digital relationship. So drag and drop. So I assume, how many of y'all had a mortgage loan at some time in your life in here? Right. How did that go? Right? Was that fun? So what we basically try to do, and this SBA loan that we do has 148 separate documents. So electronically, with a beautiful user interface, we want our borrower, Matt, and don't underestimate my man Matt. I mean, he talks with a southern drawl, but he's a smart son of a gun. So Matt wants to know two things in life. Am I approved? And when are you going to get me the money? So we basically show you, hey, Matt, you're 19% approved. Hey, Matt, you're almost there. Because the day you get us all the documents to make a credit decision, we're going to give you an answer in 24 hours. And then if there's real estate involved, then the fun begins, right? Appraisals, all that other kind of crap, right? But again, we're marching to the finish to get you the money. So we are now working on a next generation deposit in the same fashion, right? Most banks have a lot of software, enterprise software in all these different areas of the bank, and none of it's connected. So if you can fully integrate from a deposit side, merchant services for a veterinarian, remote deposit capture, bill pay, and financial forecasting through QuickBooks, all on one beautiful interface, why wouldn't you do business with that bank? Because we don't have branches, we don't have tellers, we don't have customer service reps. So we'll give you the merchant service. So if you're a Dr. Vicky, and 80% of veterinarians are female, right? And you're running $1.5 million revenue business, you make $95,000 a year. And so maybe $1.2 million of your business comes through debit and credit cards. Most banks need that fee to support their infrastructure. And we say you can have that. Oh, really? So I'm going to have another $12,000 on top of my 95. Yeah, if you move your checking account. So we're working on that piece as well. Back to Encino, I mean, my view of that is that SunTrust is a great partner. I'm going to use them as an example. And they're an owner of Encino shares. They did a whole lot of work with a company called Accenture that many of you have heard of, a company that has 250,000 employees, to see if they actually wanted to do all of their wholesale lending with this tiny little software company in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina. I mean, this isn't Oracle, this isn't the Silicon Valley, this is Encino in Wilmington, right? So these guys basically came back and said, you can shut down 13 of your systems and get 83% of the functionality day one. But that wasn't the important thing. The important thing is that Pierre partnered with Accenture to implement the software. So in 2 weeks, Accenture has taken him all over the world to meet much larger banks. So again, I mean, we're probably second pitch, first inning at the bank. He's probably, they're just singing the national anthem on him. I mean, That's it.
And I do want to talk a little bit about company culture before we run out of time, because that's something else that you guys are getting some national recognition for. But let's take a couple more questions from the audience.
Question from table 15, Jory.
Chip, I had a quick question, mostly, and this relates to a lot of the culture that you guys have going on. And with so much of your growth happening at such a fast rate, how do you remain small in culture? And you mentioned a little bit about hiring the right people that fit your culture, but what other puzzles are there that are going to come into play in growing so fast, but also kind of remaining small, hometown Wilmington feel?
Yeah, so the question was,
I can't hear worth a damn. Sorry, we already went over this. My wife and daughter are laughing at me right now.
the question was basically stealing my next question, but it was about company culture. And the faster you guys grow, how are you going to retain that small company feel that you've really established here? Is that, and also with the hiring focus that you guys are having to do?
I think about that every day, right? So, again, it is you are important to me, not me in my role, but to each other, right? And just think about the next thing. Been thinking a little bit about daycare. So, UNCW is playing in the NCAA tournament, right? We have between Encino and Live Oak 200 UNCW graduates, right? So my partner, Lee Williams, I don't know if it was Lee's here or not. I said, Lee, let's do this. Let's have a lottery to take UNCW graduates to watch them play Duke in Providence, Rhode Island. Take that one plane was on the West Coast. Let's take 2 planes up there, including pilots, 21 people, to go watch the Seahawks. Man, that's the stupidest idea. Nobody cares about basketball. Well, you're in the big dance for the first time in 10 years. What if, I know there's maybe one chance in 10 that UNCW beats Duke, but wouldn't that be fun? That kind of stuff's important. So if we can continue to do that, think of other interesting businesses to start, and I think it can be done.
I think some of those examples have been brought up already earlier, but the 401k match, the free health care, the dog kennel on site, personal trainer.
We doubled the dog kennel back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Small dog and large dog kennel.
Yeah,
on site
and one of the
after-
sections for the bad dogs too.
Dog house section.
Right.
But all of those things have been brought up by American Banker, and I believe now 2 years in a row, you guys have been named best bank to work for in the country by the magazine.
Correct.
So is this, obviously this is an intentional focus for the company. Is it something that is trying to help with the recruiting of talent from outside the area?
It's up to them. These people send these surveys, and if you guys want to do it, that's fine. Look, to me, it's simple. You treat folks the way you want to be treated, right? And if you do that, wonderful things happen. It's that simple.
Okay. All right, let's get another question from the audience.
Table 65, Liz.
Hey, with a declining number of bank charters in general, what initiatives is Live Oak taking to remain independent?
So Liz was asking, with the number of bank charters declining in general, like we were talking about, what initiatives are you guys doing to remain independent?
Well, the trite answer is we have 36 million shares outstanding, and friends and family own well over 50% of the stock. So we intend to do that.
Is it more, this is not your first public company that you've run, but in terms of like the scrutiny now versus a year ago before you were public, is it more difficult under these conditions? Is it under much more of a magnifying glass now, stock price watching?
Yes, you got to decide if you care, right? So Nick Adams at Wellington, the guy that I mentioned a minute ago, whose compounded rate of return of investment in his $30 billion fund is 22% over the last 20 years. So he's basically the Warren Buffett of the banking business. Is a good friend with Jeff Bezos. And Amazon looks way down the road. They're not going to manage that business for the quarter in any way, and we're not going to manage our business for the quarter. Again, we have effective control of the business. We're going to do the right thing for the long term. And that'll be a little bit frustrating for because you're public, we don't trade, we're kind of a stub public company, we don't trade many shares. But that's tough for somebody that wants in and out in a month or 90 days or a year or time frame. I mean, you either believe in what we're doing or you don't.
Okay, and another question?
So we've got time for one more question, so I'll ask mine.
There's a man holding the microphone.
I used to ask questions for a living. Our business community's been through a lot, I'd say, in the past 7-8 years. You know, one with the whole issue with Titan, which, you know, was a recent announcement that Titan's not going to build this facility, and also with offshore drilling, and a lot of debate about where our business community should grow. So, you know, during that time, you have founded and grown 2 very successful companies. So I think all of us would be interested in hearing, you know, some advice from you as to where you think our business community should go and what strategies we should pursue as a community.
You're sneaky. You're going to get me. You're going to get me in real trouble here. Well, I mean, here's the way I would answer that. First of all, relative to business development in southeastern North Carolina, I would call it southeastern North Carolina, not necessarily New Hanover County or the city of Wilmington. I mean, and I have no experience in these matters, and I know there are probably a lot of very well-intentioned folks in Pender County and Brunswick County and Wilmington that are interested in bringing new business to Wilmington. But when you were asking me that question, I was reminded of a boss that I had at Wachovia and Winston-Salem in the 70s. And my territory was the state of Kentucky to get loans and deposits. And he'd come by my office and he'd say, "Hey, Mahan, what are you doing here? You're either writing up a credit or you're making appointments for your next trip. Because you don't get any walk-in traffic in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So what are you doing here?" And I would say the same thing to the business development people. How many calls have you made? This is all about shoe leather. Who are we going after? What is the strategy? And I don't know the answer to any of that. Maybe it's all going fantastic. But, you know, I think relative to our business, and I know Pierre agrees with me on this, I mean, there are going to be massive winners and losers in the financial services business. And I don't know why we can't create, you know, a little Silicon Valley right here in Wilmington, North Carolina, from a technology standpoint.
All right, Chip Mahan, thanks very much for your time today and for speaking with all of us, and thank all of you for your thoughtful questions. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and learned something. Rob wanted to come up and give a little token of appreciation.
So, you know, it's been publicly reported that Chip was involved back when the Atlanta Braves were looking at possibly bringing a team here, and there's occasionally been rumors that he's interested in that still. So we always like to give our speakers reading assignments. So when we were pursuing what books to get him, we happened to come upon 3 baseball books. Big Data Baseball, Interball, and The Game Must Go On. So we want to leave you with this reading, and if it happens to lead to something else, that would be great.
Thanks, Rob.
So thank you, everyone, for coming. The Expo Hall is now open. Seminars start at 1:45, and the bars come out at 4:30. Thank you.